Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Noor. Great job and great session with Salian. We should have Sal as a service for our startups. She's amazing. Thank you, everyone. So first of all, welcome to Highway to 100 Unicorns. This is our virtual conference, and actually, the story of Highway has a lot to do with today, which is our talent day, and we talk about culture and scaling, building and scaling culture, right? So my former manager and counterpart, so she's been the managing director for India, Microsoft for startups in India, Latika Pai, came up with this concept of highway, and the idea there was starting in India, right? So the unicorns in India, so companies, startups that have been growing up and scaled and kept also their culture, right? So they are coming out of three cities mainly today: Mumbai, Delhi, and Bangalore. And the idea with highway was to be more inclusive, right? So how we could have gone to tier 2 and tier 3 cities, but surface talent, ideas that were there and give them more access while directing more VC funds to those states. So that's one of the reasons we're doing highway, is to bring this concept to our region, to Middle East and Africa, right? So and give this opportunity, this voice to talent that we have in the region, and to startups that either are building or are at a stage where they're really trying to grow their business and scale. Now, scale is a very nice stage for a startup to be. It's a very nice problem to have, meaning it means you have built something, you probably have achieved the product market fit, you have proven that there is a market, there are customers that are adopting your products, but then what is next, right? So first of all, it has to happen at the right time. You don't want to scale something that is not going to work, is going to be a disaster. But at the same time, it has a lot to do with talent and with people. So what's the way to look at that? When we build a company, I mean, there is always an intersection of two things. A company has a lot of hardware, a lot of those hardcore things that has to be there, right? So it's the product, is the alignment, is the different departments, the team, the operations that needs to be there to run the business. But there is this software component that is what is powering the hardware, is the operating system behind the hardware, if you want, is the real software that has to do with culture, with people. And ultimately, this is what determines the success of your business, of your startup at a time where you're trying to scale. So one thing is, and the starting point of all of this is how you're looking at people, right? How you're looking at building the software of your company at a stage where you're trying to build the business and to grow the business and to go to other countries. So we talked a lot before as well. When you build the culture, we talked a lot about concepts like passion. We talked a lot about diversity, inclusion. We talked about skills, and we talked about knowledge and environment and many things, right? So we always forget. Most of the times, we forget to add a simple word before each one of those other words, which is the effectiveness of those things, right? So it's not enough to have passion to be a great entrepreneur, because that passion might not end up, having you building the right thing or something that can really scale. It's not enough for being authentic or to hire people that are authentic, right? To build an authentic culture, because you can be authentic, but still you might not be able to build something that scale. It's the effectiveness of those things all together that makes a huge difference. So a lot of founders, a lot of people, even a lot of larger organizations, they mostly focus on efficiency, trying to do things right and trying to enable people and teams to be as efficient as possible in terms of processes. And this is something you start looking at when you're at the stage where you scale, because you focus more on the processes, right? Because you're building something that needs to be sustainable. The more you expand, the more you grow, right? So, but the learning here, or the takeaway here, is that probably it's more important to focus on the effectiveness of how you implement culture in the organization, because it's more about how you do the right thing. Because exactly, you're at a stage where you want to build something where you want to do the right thing to go and have the outcome that you see from your revenues, from growing the business, from getting appraisal or appreciation from your employees first. So you want to build an environment where basically you want people to choose that environment every day. So, and how you do that is you iterate on, first of all, you start from bringing a lot of clarity, right? So the clarity of purpose, you bring it on the table when you talk about building your culture. It connects back to what is the mission and the purpose of what you're building, right? So you need to bring a lot of clarity to the table, because the clarity of purpose is what drives people to be inspired and to follow you. At the same time, we said it starts with people, so you have to have strong hiring filters in place, and that doesn't mean that you're going to be. You need to be very careful that this does not act as a sort of a mechanism that filter out diverse populations, right? So you go for diversity and inclusion. You want people to belong to an environment you're building, so you can have both a common sense of purpose and a diverse employee base at the same time. But you have to have those strong hiring filters in place. And more importantly, I would say you need to be very intentional on the kind of people you want to bring on board, because this new phase in this stage of in your journey, right? So this phase of scaling comes with a different set of needs and challenges that you're going to face. So probably you need a different kind of people as well that have different experience on board. At the same time, this connects also with constantly emphasizing the values day to day, right? So you need to repeat your values until you're blue in the face, sort of, right? So here actually is one of those things where over communication is actually a must, or is something that is really beneficial to how you're going to scale and grow your company. The second you're really sick of saying the same thing over and over, you will find people that have started repeating it back to you. And that's when it gets into the blood of, or into your teams, into how you're going to scale your company, right? And that the secret is communication. And my takeaway for communication is that you need to keep communication, probably since day one, but even more importantly, when you're about to scale, you need to keep it like very informal. Like a scrappy communication. I used to use the analogy of the coffee machine. When you are in a big corporation, you go to the coffee machine with your colleagues, and you have a very informal communication, right? So because sometimes the trap is that when you get too formal, or when you leverage more authority or those kind of things, people don't open up, and actually you want to achieve exactly the opposite. So if your people would be like this, like a closed fist, right? So nothing can get into. But if you open it up, it's when people becomes receptive, right? So and communication is one of those things that you can leverage to have more of the people in your teams opening up. Close to that, another element that I think is very important at the stage where you're scaling is performance. So is how you reward people, and you need to reward people based on performance as well as culture, right? So and successful organization, they don't have a fear of setting clear OKRs that could be also audacious, or really can push the boundaries, right? But at the same time, they're also achievable. It's something that moves people forward, but also provide a baseline according to which then you can manage performance. People should be rewarded with promotions financially, so it's not just about the money, but not just for the productivity, which links back to the efficiency, right? But also for living the company's values, and how you live these values as the founder, as the entrepreneur. Of course, how you do not walk past standards that do not speak the values that you set for your company is extremely important. And that connects back also to how you live by those standards, right? So you need to get rid of bad culture fits as quickly as possible, because those are something that can really corrupt the way you're building your company at a stage where it's a delicate phase, when you are thinking about expanding internationally, where you're thinking about setting up processes that can help you scale, and building a product so that they can help you scale faster, right? So you really need to live by those values. The other point is also when we talked about, and this connects a lot about communication, performance, and rewarding people, is building this sort of positive energy. At the end of the day, you need to put people in a flow, right? And the way to do it is as well is appreciating the work that people is doing, is having people that are generous in the sense that they pass the credit for something, but they keep the blame, right? So even if you end up hiring people that could be fiercely independent because they have specific skills or experience, and you want to leverage that, you want the sum to be greater than the part, right? So, and you want people to feel a sense of interdependency or dependency. So the fact that they're coming together and following your cause, your purpose, is because they are together as a team and they can help. Those things to happen. So there is also this other concept that has to do a lot with sort of the well-being of the team. At a stage where you're scaling, probably even the pressure is probably increasing, and you're bringing in sort of a change, and there is always a component of resistance to that change, right? So probably is in analogy to what Sally-Ann was saying before about hiring fast versus hiring slow, and firing fast versus firing slow, right? So it's a similar principle. Is sometimes it's really convenient or it's really helpful to slow down in order to run faster later. And you don't have to have a fear of that, because sometimes what's the trap that a lot of founders or a lot of startups fall into is this speed trap. You get this trap early days when you try to fundraise for the first time, and you try to get probably the common mistake is try to fundraise too fast, right? Too much money too early. It's the same thing with culture. Is you try to put your head down and get things done. Again, you fall in this trap of efficiency versus being effective. And in order to do that, you need to have this awareness that there's nothing wrong in sometimes in taking the time, right, to step back and slowing down, because you can run faster later. You can do whatever you want, as Sally-Ann said, as a founder. You don't have to have those fears, especially at a time where you want to scale, because scaling is tricky. Again, as we said, as an IT system, garbage in, garbage out. When you scale the wrong thing, it exponentially the outcome can be exponentially bad or negative, right? So taking that time to slow down, to run faster later, it's sometimes very important, and it's sometimes what makes a big difference in the culture of the organization you're trying to scale. And finally, I would say is also a matter of building this sort of perseverance against failure and risk taking, right? So that's important because you're at a stage where you are scaling, you're internationalizing, for example, you're expanding in other countries. So this strong motivation to scale, to grow, helps the management, usually in a startup, frame hurdles as opportunities, and thus be more prepared to fend off any arising difficulties, right? So that should be the mindset. And think about it, when you're scaling, for example, you are going in foreign markets, maybe in markets where you don't even have presence, right? So you're looking to scale through partnership, through people that, or cultures or countries where you have not been before. So this requires a higher risk-taking ability, since there is more information asymmetry, and that thing is more pronounced, right? So this higher risk tolerance accounts for agility in decision-making, and this is really crucial when you seize the right opportunities, right? So I've been, for example, amazed with the story of Maëlle Gait. She's now the CEO of Techstars globally, but before she was the CEO of this startup that now became a mainstream, is a great company also in Russia, and she lived in Moscow. And she has been going through this growth and scale story, right? From a series of setbacks, including discovery on embryo stage e-commerce, low credit cards penetration, poor road infrastructure, lack of reliable delivery service, and consumer trust, right? And she turned that into becoming the sort of the Amazon of Eastern European and Russian and CIS countries, right? So the way she's been doing that is constantly pushing and pushing and pushing on a permanent basis, and over communicating, and even verbally, visually, right? So being a positive about what is the mantra that she used when team were telling her something was too complicated. She was pushing the boundaries of making people feeling uncomfortable to try and achieve something really different, something really cool. But at the same time, choosing that company, choosing that mission, that purpose every day. So this is a great learning, right? So when you're trying to change the culture, because the other learning is that you don't have to preserve the culture as a founder. I believe what you need to do is to steering the evolution of the culture, especially at a time where you are trying to scale, because things might be fluid, might be evolving, might be dynamic, right? There are always variables you cannot control. And think about the impact of something like COVID or a crisis or something unexpected that can come and severely impact the way you are looking at pivoting. But the lessons learned in my experience when in cultures, you want to change the culture, especially at the time where you're trying to scale, is again, this change requires clarity on the part of senior management, of you as a founder, about what the new cultural norms are and why they are important. It requires, again, clear, consistent, relentless communication from the entire senior team, your senior team, and yourself, of course, first as a founder. Focusing the teams on few simple metrics, we said before, performance, but as well, you need to simplify the few simple metrics against which progress towards a new culture is assessed, and make fit or add to the culture part of the performance evaluation of your people. And then you need to involve people throughout the firm, typically cascading into the organization, right? With vivid examples of how the new culture is rewarded and the old is not. So the language you use, the behaviors and the norms that you reward and you allow people to reward, and the standard you accept, of course, are those things that make the culture every day and make people feel this sort of, we believe in the impact we are doing. We see that there is dependency on us coming together as a team, but still we are allowed to express ourselves as people. The other thing I would say is, especially at a stage where you are to scale, maybe, and this connects back to this concept of slowing down to run faster, is having this approach of thinking really even more longer term, right? So delaying in a way sort of the gratification that you might get with low-hanging fruits. But if you are scaling, you want to build something that is even more long-term, right? Because you want to face the real challenges when you face scale early on. So this long-term approach to looking at culture, I think, is really important because it makes a huge difference in the way you are, you are rewarding your people, you are setting it up, you are bringing this change in, and then it's a managing culture in a scaled environment, which comes through leadership that needs to be visible, accessible, the language you use, how you hire, we said, for fit or for involving employees and setting clear standards, the rewards. So all of these are the elements where you can manage your software. Meanwhile, you should keep investing in training, continuous training for empowering people to bring their best and to make them a better version of themselves, potentially because you see this as a learning opportunity. And finally, this is it, probably, is turning your organization a little bit what's the Microsoft story we're telling since Satya moved to CEO, right? So it's moving from a know-it-all to a learn-it-all organization. So having your teams and your culture, which is a learning culture, where you embrace the risks, you embrace the failure, but you keep learning from that, you iterate on that, and you build something that is a long-term view that brings this growth into a stage where you're going out there, trying to say, yes, we have this confidence that we did it. We got the customers that they told us this feedback, but we are at a stage we want to scale it. So what can I ensure that is we are still learning, right? So you need to bring that level of honesty and humbleness into your growth process. So I'm checking in with Noor as well if we are getting questions from the audience. So I want to make it more interactive as well and see if this was relevant and interesting for you guys.
Amazing. Thank you, Roberto. There were some really incredible insights there, and we have some great questions in the chat. And I promised you difficult questions before the session, and difficult questions they will be. So, Roberto, the first question is, ultimately, as a startup founder, we have a difficult time prioritizing, right? There's 55 million things you need to do at any one moment in time. So what is your advice for founders who are trying to balance the sort of survival, cash flow, very scary operational challenges of being an early stage startup with building a culture that will ultimately allow you to run fast later on?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. I mean, it's a great question. So my advice is, we said it before, is it has a lot to do with effectiveness, right? So and people. So the only way you can effectively scale is if you bring in people that can trust, that you can trust, and basically people that are able to see things differently, right? So that you don't have to add one additional headcount in order to get something to scale. I mean, it's you need to scale through the people and through the culture of the people and through the people you bring on board, because if those people embrace or anticipate things or see things through what's the impact, so they are able to absorb some of the challenges that you mentioned as a founder, and as all of the founders are going through probably the same ups and downs and the same journey at some point. They will be able to absorb that more effectively, because they are driven by the purpose that you're serving, who you're serving it for, right? So why they are in your team, why they are joining your venture. So people is the key element, in my opinion, that can make a difference, because once you have good people on board, you have people that are motivated. You have people that are flexible enough or adaptable to understand that it's not about a title. It's not about you open a role with a job title and a description, but it's also about, have these lenses through which you're looking at the business, through which you're looking at the challenges, and you are there, to bring your point of view, and you are there to make that change. Right. So people is one thing and effectiveness is the other. So focusing is always, there is a lot of value in focus. It's very hard to prioritize, but this exercise of, for example, setting the few metrics that determines your success, so how you're measuring success, and determining those few metrics for your business that allow you to grow, is what drives also that focus, right? So you don't have to worry to not having the time to do everything, or to say no to certain things that you might end up doing later, or you will not be doing. But you really need to ruthlessly prioritize and focus those things that can really move the needle and make a real impact towards the journey that you're setting for your company.
Amazing. Roberto, we have quite a few more questions, so I'm going to try and squeeze in as many as we can. One question: how can you ensure that as an organization you're on track? So this is about measuring culture, right? How can you make sure that you're on track building culture and sticking to your values?
Well, there are definitely different ways. One it could be straightforward, is retention, right? So people don't want to leave if they have a great culture where they can learn and they can work towards a purpose or an impact that they can really make, right? So retention is one, but I would say also the other side of it, which is attraction. If when you get
people want to work with you.
Yeah, how many people want to work with you? It's key, right? So it means it's a recognition. It means that you're doing an amazing job. It means that you are telling a story that people buy into, and more people want to contribute to that. And then I would say there are things that things like, someone told me when the best way to spot if there is a good culture or a good environment is you enter in that office and you see people smiling, from the receptionist to the founder, right? So everyone. Right, so you feel it on your skin, right? So sometimes, yes, you can hard code it with some sort of metrics, right? So you can architect those metrics, like there are things like you give kudos, or the number of sort of formal recognition that someone in the team is receiving, or things like that. Fair enough, but sometimes it's more intangible, right? So, and again, you can sense it yourself. You yourself as a founder, you can be a customer of your startup and see what the experience is. And when you walk in that door, you immediately get a sense if people are there with their own self, if you're building an environment where people are thriving because they can really be themselves and they don't have any fear in even dissenting, right, or bringing a different opinion. You can get a feeling without being overcomplicating or overkilling with metrics.
Yeah.
On top of that, you can definitely set some metrics to check in with the health of how you're building that culture.
While we're getting plenty of questions, and guys, thank you so much for your attention. Roberto, this has been a great session. Unfortunately, we only have time for like one or two questions, but this one is really cool. How do you reduce resistance to change? So let's say you're doing a cultural facelift internally. You're like, hey, we need to uplift our values or rework on them. How can you make people more likely to be part of the solution here?
Yeah, look, resistance to change, in my experience, is inevitable, right? So people get used to something, they develop their own habits. So, oh my God, then if someone comes and they ask you to do something different, and there is always sort of a natural inertia of resistance, right? So, in my opinion, the way you bring you reduce or you minimize that resistance is definitely, it starts with the purpose. So why the why, right? So why people should change. So and that question sounds straightforward, but it's the most difficult to answer, and it connects to who you are as a founder. If you're talking about a startup environment, right? Who you are as a founder. So why um, and who you want to become, right? So it's very important. So if you don't inspire people to follow, if you don't give them a bigger cause for why they would be changing, they won't follow, right? So one thing is building that purpose. The other thing is bringing everyone on board with that purpose, which starts with as well communicating that purpose. So the story you tell about the purpose and how you communicate about the cause, the purpose, why people should then bring a different perspective or change onto this new way of looking at things, or pivoting or things like that, right? So and then is also how you again how you reward those behaviors, right? So at the end of the day, there is this human dimension behind all of this theory of change, which is when it is the same as someone entered the door in a room and they come with that sort of energy, right? So you need to build for that energy. So the way to minimize that resistance is you bring in a bigger energy that
Yes.
that moves people in that flow, and they will follow.
And Roberto, just our last question. A lot of this is much easier done in real life versus virtually and remotely. How do you advise founders who are managing either distributed or remote teams to build and scale culture?
Yeah, this is a wonderful question. It's true. It's more difficult, right? So nothing replaces the human interaction and the fact that you're physically in the same place, because you read the body, right? So it's as we said, there is this human side, and it's also about emotions. I would say, first of all, it starts with mindset and how you nurture this mindset within your team, especially in a distributed remote environment. So nothing you can do, right? So but at the same time is uh, if you can influence or if you can change the way people see things, then the immediate next thing is that you can really change the way people feel about things, right? So when you put when you give Salian was mentioning before, this language of love that can be declined in many other things is loving people. So if you love someone, maybe the distance is something that can be forgotten or can be minimized, because there is this attention level, right? So you really focus on the people and allow them to thrive because you value their contribution. The language you use, the over communication you do, the fact that you architect that even people that are in remote locations have their chance to be heard and listen and part of the game, right? So you need to intentionally build that environment, and you can definitely do even in a remote environment. Everybody would accept today. You see the beauty of COVID right now when you are home and your kids enter the room and nobody really feels offended, right? So nobody gets angry or upset during a meeting, even
No,
if
we
it's a
love seeing your kids, Roberto.
I
We
know.
love spending time with them.
No, but that's the same thing, right? So that human element, you don't have to put barriers or efforts to try to avoid it. You
Yeah.
need to be vulnerable, and once you don't know an answer, you actually you can empower someone in your remote team and you can ask. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, from our side, actually, I have to say, Roberto, as a team member of Roberto, he's very great at getting us to propose initiatives and getting people actively involved to be part of the solution of building culture, etc., which sort of builds on what Salian was saying. Is happiness is an inside job, and it's very much a two-way street. Roberto, thank you so much for your incredible insights as always. I don't just say this because he's my boss. It's always true. Endless wisdom and endless insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Noor. Thank you for being an amazing moderator. No, and thank you everyone for. I really see a lot of questions, right? So thank you for this engagement is our best reward. So definitely thank you everyone for attending, and wishing you a great highway ahead. Enjoy the sessions we are offering you, and give us feedback. We want to hear from you. Because the idea this year was to provide you shorter sessions but more practical. So hold us accountable on that. So give us that feedback and tell us if we're doing a good job on that.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Roberto. Roberto is also very generous with his time and energy. And I think if anyone reaches out to him on LinkedIn, he will definitely answer at some point.
That's called artificial intelligence.